An early chapter in the novel describes the differences between Native American values and the contemporary values. And the chapter reads this: Whitney had his own connections. He was Native American. His ancestors had no written language. Their history was passed on by word of mouth, by music, by stories, and by poems. One day, Whitney related to Eloise James a description of very early contact between his people and European settlers. Whitney insisted that they were settlers. As he said, they had not come to see how we lived. They came to settle. They wanted the land. They were interested in making money off of the land. On the other hand, we had no idea what money is. We bartered for everything we needed. We didn't own anything. Who can own the land? Whitney paused. He remembered David's remarks. I understood David very well when he spoke about the commonwealth, the water, the earth, the air, the land, the trees, the heat of the sun. Whitney then picked up a large stick. He drew a big circle on the ground. That was our land. He drew a ring around part of that land. That was where we lived. We lived together. In the cooler months, we built little teepees to shield ourselves from the cold. He drew another ring. That was where we produced the food that we needed to live. Through the middle of the area, he drew a crooked line. That was the river. It provided us with some food. It gave us the water that we needed. It also allowed us to travel. We sometimes needed to go elsewhere in order to find food and other things that we need. We also needed to trade with neighboring groups, and they also needed to trade with us. Most of the area was not within the living area and the garden area. Eloise James asked, what happened to the rest of the area? That land belonged to the other residents. The other residents? Yes, the deer, the bear, the birds, the trees, all of the other creatures. That's the majority of the land. They're the majority of the population. Whitney paused to allow all these ideas to penetrate the very being of Eloise James. And then he continued. We believed that we all had to survive together. We needed the animals for food. The deer provided us with clothing. Their bones provided our tools. The trees provided us with food, protection from the sun, and with transportation. We needed to protect them for our own welfare. Whitney erased the circle where the food was produced. He drew another circle in another area. We could not just continue to use the same spot for growing our food. We had to let the area rest. So we moved our farming area to another place on our land. It all seemed so simple, too simple for people who live in such a complicated world today. Eloise James wondered how it all broke down. Before she had a chance to express that, Whitney erased all the lines in the circle. And he said, "There's another way of looking at the land. That way also affects how we look at ourselves." He began drawing small squares throughout the entire area of the circle. And he said, "The Europeans began to teach my ancestors that individuals could own the land. The land no longer existed to meet the common needs of all people. Land could be owned. The owner could use the land in any way that benefited the owner. There was no longer any necessity to provide for the needs of others. Each person had his own little area." How did they pull that off? They introduced money. Money? Yes, little pieces of paper that said they were worth something, that they represented a certain amount of property or other goods. "Do you follow me?" Whitney asked. Eloise nodded, so Whitney continued. "Basically, Europeans introduced debt." "John Law," Eloise blurted. "Oh yes, John Law. Of course he did not do it for the common good, out of a sense of the commonwealth. He did it in order to make a profit." Eloise James responded, "I don't understand how he pulled it off." "Guns. Guns?" "Yes, he introduced guns. He sold the natives guns, 20 to 30 deerskin for one gun. The deer were no longer fellow creatures whose area had to be protected. They were the price natives had to pay in order to get the guns which killed them." Eloise replied, "So it was no longer necessary to keep areas safe for the animals. They were now targets rather than fellow creatures." "Exactly." Without stopping, Whitney went on. "The guns could kill the deer and other animals, but those guns required ammunition. That ammunition also sold for 20 to 30 deerskin. Soon the deer were pretty well depleted. The natives were told, 'We will take your land in payment of the debt.' The first U.S. debt was gun-related," Eloise said, before she even realized what she was saying. When the full impact of what she said reached her brain, Eloise James added, "Not much has changed in a few hundred years." "Not much," Whitney affirmed.